paper. Okay. So good afternoon, or no, rather, good morning, everybody. We are very, very thrilled this morning to have a presentation by Rabbi Dr. Dvora Weisberg, and thanks to Harry Rosenfeld for getting that going. I'm going to give you a little tiny intro, bio to Dvora, even though I know nobody needs an intro to her. But as you probably know, Dvora is the Rabbi Aaron D. Pankin Professor of Rabbinics, the HUC-JAR Rabbinical School Director, and Rabbinical Program Director in Los Angeles. She received her BA from Brandeis University and her MA and her PhD in Talmud and Rabbinic Literature from the Jewish Theological Seminary. Before coming to HUC-JAR, Dr. Weisberg taught at the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, the College of William and Mary, and the University of Pittsburgh. Dr. Weisberg is the author of Levirate Marriage and the Family in Ancient Judaism, which explores the ancient rabbis' understanding of family and familial relationships, and also of Tractate Menachot, a feminist commentary. And Dr. Weisberg teaches frequently in informal settings, including this one. And she also teaches for several summers at the URJ Kala and sessions for the CCAR and its regional conventions. So Dvora, we are so happy to have you here this morning. And the floor is yours now for the next hour.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation. It's so wonderful to see colleagues. This, I think, is the only upside to Zoom, is that we can be together without having been in the same state. So I want to begin this morning with the observation of Rabbi Hanina, who said, "I've learned much from my teachers, more from my colleagues, and even more from my students." Now, the subject that we're going to speak about today is one where I can truly say I have been my students' student. They are my primary teachers on this topic, and I'm very conscious that probably some of them would be even better at this than I am, but here we go. And I want to say also that this is something that I am constantly learning more about. So what I'm sharing with you today is what I know today, and probably by next week, I'll have learned something new. So this is a topic which is changing far more rapidly than anything I study about the Talmud. The title of this morning's presentation serves as an acknowledgement that the world that most of us grew up in has changed and continues to change rapidly. One of those changes is our understanding of sexuality and gender. In the past 40 years, we've gone, I think most of us are happy about this, from a country in which homosexuality was considered justifiable cause for firing my 6th grade public school teacher, and in which in many jurisdictions consensual acts between two men were illegal, to living in a country that recognizes gay marriage, that allows same-sex couples in most states to adopt. And we've also gone from a world in which gender was seen as a binary, male, female, to a world in which male and female are now viewed by many as only two of a variety of ways to think about gender. I think it's fair to say that many of us have been left a bit dazed by these changes, by the rapidity of change. We find ourselves having to rethink notions that once seemed very, very clear to us, and to learn new vocabulary and engage ideas about gender that seem foreign to us. And this is not about receptivity. This is not about being closed-minded or being biased. It's just about absorbing new ideas very rapidly. And those of us who work with 20-somethings and 30-somethings are often seen by our students as being completely out of date when we think that we're trying really hard. This is something that at HUC has become a daily reality. The object of this session is to begin a conversation about things that may be unfamiliar to some of us, and the language that we can use to better understand and navigate what is truly a changing landscape. So I want to talk a little first about what we may think about gender and gender identity, both in general and in Judaism. For most of human history, sex and gender were interchangeable concepts. And I think for some people, even making that distinction is still quite challenging. So from the moment of birth, almost every individual was recognized as male or female. And that identity, that label, that marker determined a significant portion of an individual's socialization and expectations. And I think for those of us I was born in 1960. This was still very much the case. People asked my brother what he wanted to be when he grew up, and they did not ask me. And it's probably just as well, because once I started answering that question, it caused a great deal of consternation for people. Many obligations and or privileges were assigned based on being male or female. This was certainly true in my gym classes. The boys got to wear sweatpants when they went outside in the rain in San Francisco, and we had to wear these dreadful blue bloomers in which we both froze and looked quite hideous. Even in cultures that acknowledge the existence of same-sex relationships, there was an overarching assumption that one's gender, which was understood primarily to be male or female, would determine a significant portion of one's life and one's life choices. Today, we recognize that gender and sex are not the same thing, and that a person's sex as assigned at birth is not an indication of their sexual orientation. And by sexual orientation, I mean are to whom we are attracted, right? That is the people to whom we are romantically or sexually attracted. Nor is a person's sexual orientation a function of their own gender identity. Gender is not about sex or sexual orientation. Rather, and at this moment, I'm going to try to share my screen, which we hope I can do. Well, yes, amen. Okay. Rather, as Joy Landon writes, gender exists at the place where inner life meets embodied life. It is neither purely personal or and internal, nor is it purely biological. Each of us carries a distinct internal sense of ourself as a gendered being. What does Judaism have to say about these things? Sex or gender was generally determined, as I said, in Judaism by one's external genitalia. Even the words zachar and nekeva acknowledge primarily that maleness and femaleness is a function of one's organs. A child born with a penis was recognized as a male, as a boy. A child born without a penis was generally recognized as a female or a girl. This binary was imperfect. Even in antiquity, writers acknowledged the existence of individuals who did not exhibit these markers of gender the way that was expected. So in Mishnah Nazir 2:7, the rabbis distinguish between a male and three other types of human beings. One of those is female, and the other two are what we might call today gender non-conforming. That is, they do not conform to the rabbinic definitions of male and female. They are known, as most of you probably know, as the androgynos and the tumtum. By the way, I want to note that by grouping female tumtum and androgynous together in opposition to the male, the rabbis are reflecting the idea that the male form is, forgive me, the gold standard of humanity. That is, it is the norm for which the rabbis, have jurisdiction and for which they create laws. Everything else is a deviation from the standard norm, and the rabbis, share that with the Greek image as well. Rabbinic texts offer us no clear definition of the tumtum. If you read Bavli Baba Batra 126b, there's an indication that a tumtum is an individual with no clear genitalia. That is, the rabbis don't see in the tumtum the markers that they use to distinguish between male and female. In the absence of genitalia, the rabbis could determine the gender of the tumtum because they couldn't, right? They place upon the tumtum the obligations of both men and women. So it's rather, if you will, a play it safe mode. That is, we assign obligations and privileges based on genitalia. If we cannot determine your genitalia, better safe than sorry. You have all these restrictions and privileges, and that way we won't do anything wrong. So for instance, the tumtum is obligated to wear tzitzit because he might be male, but can't be part of a zimun for Birkat Hamazon just in case the tumtum is a female. So again, you see that we do sometimes now talk about the rabbis being aware of 4 gender possibilities, but I think it would be more accurate to say that the rabbis are aware of 2 clear genders, male and female, and then there are these people who present a problem for them because they won't fit into their categories. And this, I think, is a reflection of the rabbi's preference for binary, not just, by the way, in gender, but in everything. If you've studied Mishnah, either with me or someone else, you know that the rabbis love to create the sorting hat, if you will, right? And their preferences for 2 categories, A and not A, or A and B, and everything else is a mystery to them, almost a problem to be solved. So if we look at Mishnah Sota 3:8, the rabbis ask, what is the difference between a man and a woman? A man who's a metzora bears his head, tears his clothes, a woman does not. A man may take a vow making his son a Nazir, but a woman may not. A man may bring offerings and cut his hair to complete his father's Nazirite vow, but a woman may not.
Well, I just was thinking that, there are different, depending on the text that we look at, there are different ways that the rabbis indicate that we should behave. Like, this particular text says one thing, but I seem to remember other texts saying different kinds of things. So is there a way to reconcile the different texts in terms of the behaviors that the rabbis suggest for men and women? And I thought there's another text that says there are 6 genders. Dvora just said that this text the text that she's given to us today indicate 4 genders, but there was something that I learned, I think it was Denise Egger, who said there's a text about 6 genders. Does
Yeah,
anybody
I've
know
seen
what
that too.
text is?
I also know of the 6 gender text. Let me check.
Because I think that if we combine all these different kinds of texts, it gives a fuller picture of what the historical tradition indicates about genders.
Oh, here I have this. Here, let me
Okay,
share
cool.
my screen, folks. I'm going to share my screen because I do have something. Okay, so this says is Zachar Nekeva,
Elonita.
Androgynos, Tumtum, Ilonit, and Saris. So we might want to ask her about that when she returns.
Yeah, she mentioned already androgynous and tumtum, I think.
Right, but she didn't mention the other 2. She said there were 4 as opposed to 6.
Right, and I think my understanding is that I'm not sure that they're all referenced in the same text, but that 6 is, we can identify throughout the breadth of rabbinic text at least 6 genders that the rabbis characterize in different ways.
By the way, this is a good website for those who may or may not know about it, keshetonline.org. Okay, let's see, we've got, okay, Dana Benson says there's also a Talmudic text regarding the relations of women. Daniel Brenner says, I think we can trust Dvora as our teacher today. Okay. Melanie Aaron says there's a text in Yevanimot that talks about Abraham and Sarah as Tumtumim and is included in the Sha'arei Sahav prayer book, page 183. And then Matt Friedman says, I did a Tikkun Leil Shavuot a couple of years ago, at least 6 genders, maybe 8. Rabbi Heather Miller says Bikurin and Mishpah.
Hello.
Hi. Okay, I was just
back.
sharing something and maybe you can respond to this, Dvora, because this question was asked while you were gone. According to this material here, there are actually 6 genders, and I don't know if you were going to get to that eventually.
No,
There's
I'm
Elonit
not.
and Saris. You're not. Okay.
No.
Any
Okay.
reason?
Yes, because I want to talk about modernity mostly, not
Okay.
otherwise.
Okay, fine.
Okay, there we go. All
Welcome
right.
back.
I'm not going to, thank you. I'm not going to screen share because I think it's just like, clearly my internet is in a bad mood. So the less I do with it, the better. Okay. So where were we? So the fourth category in Nazir is the androgynous. I'm gonna stay on gallery view because I don't want to look at myself, frankly. And according to the rabbinic text, the androgynous is someone who shows 2 types of genitalia, right? Male and female genitalia. By the way, there's a tremendous dispute among contemporary scholars whether the androgynous and the tumtum are real. That is, whether the rabbis really knew of people like this, or whether the rabbis create these categories simply to have more categories. But in either case, right, what we know is that they recognize that gender is not always binary, right? So I don't think, and the other thing I want to acknowledge, and one of the reasons I'm not going to go further into the rabbinic categories that you were discussing while I was gone, is that I don't think these rabbinic categories, beyond acknowledging that gender is complicated, are very useful to us as we deal with gender today. I think realistically, we understand, because they understand gender as being about genitalia, and we do not understand gender as being about genitalia. So I want to simply acknowledge from the texts that I gave you, that I'm not now going to put up on the screen, that for the rabbis, there is the sense of the male norm. That is the person for whom they are primarily legislating. And on some level, everything else is a deviation from the norm. And when I say that, it's not to say that they thought women were abnormal, right? But rather that their interest in gender is radically different than our interest in gender. Their interest in gender is determining who does which mitzvot. Our interest is people, right? Which is not to say that the rabbis didn't know people. So this, I think, is the issue for us, is how is our understanding of gender in contemporary Judaism different and needs to be different than the rabbi's understanding, which will then influence the way we think about ritual. And again, I want to acknowledge that most of us were born into a world where gender and sexuality were often understood to be the same thing, and where gender could be neatly sorted. And you can still see that, I think. You know, I am blown away by gender reveal parties, both because they tend to catch on fire and because it's this notion that gender can be determined from an ultrasound, which is actually incredible, is a misunderstanding of gender, right? All you can determine from an ultrasound, besides whether your kid is, going to suck their thumb, is whether you can see genitalia, which is not how we understand gender today, all right? So what I want to start with is that on the very simplest level, our understanding of gender today is based, should be based, not on what we see, either in terms of genitalia or in terms of anything, but is really much more complex. And yes, Max, yes, people who have gender reveal parties do understand it that way. And that's why we all end up with little pink and blue presents for our poor child, right? Even if they're wrong. Yes. So one of the things that we now see is a rejection of this gender binary. Thank you, Suzanne, but I actually think I'm just better off this way. So I now have a significant number of students who describe themselves as non-binary. And I think that, first of all, one of the things that I've learned in the last year or 2 years is that when a student tells me that they are non-binary, they are not telling me something that I can understand based on what the last student who told me they were non-binary told me, right? That is that on the simplest level, when a student says to me, Dvora, I am non-binary and I use they, them pronouns, what the student is telling me is that they understand their identity outside of the categories of male and female, and I should assume nothing beyond that, right? That which is very, very challenging to people who like explanations for everything, right? So I have congregations that we serve that say, oh, yes, we know that so-and-so uses they, them pronouns, but they really present as female. And I'm like, no, no, no. You look at so-and-so and you look at so-and-so's name and you assume certain things. But if the student tells you that they are non-binary, whatever you think your assumption is wrong. And by the way, this is incredibly difficult for me to explain to the congregations because I myself don't have an explanation. That is, any explanation that I give them would be probably imperfect, if not incorrect. So that's the first thing. Another thing that I think I have learned over the last few years that is tremendously important is that when someone says they are non-binary, they are telling you nothing about their sexuality, right? That non-binary, because that's the other fallacy that my poor congregations fall into, and some of my faculty, right? That non-binary means that they are attracted to people of both sexes, genders, whatever. And that is not necessarily what the person is saying. That's sexuality, again, and gender are separate. And they are not necessarily telling you that they are trans, which is what I want to talk about next. So I want to separate non-binary, which I would simply say to you when a person tells you they are non-binary, all you need to say to yourself is, I may not sort this person into my little boxes that are marked male and female, zehu zeh, right? That is all you need to assume and know at the moment, right? Let me talk a little now about trans, and I am now going to try defining things that I am still also in process with, right? According to what I have read, the word transgender is used to describe an individual, and I now quote, whose gender identity and or expression is different from cultural expectations based on the sex they were assigned at birth. Let me try that again, all right? When someone tells you that they are trans, what you can assume is that the gender that they were assigned at birth, or the sex they were assigned at birth, which again was based on presumably on their genitalia, since we don't do any chromosomal testing on babies, right, is not the gender with which they identify today. We do not use the term transsexual anymore. Please, please, please erase it from your vocabulary. And in fact, it is now considered more appropriate to use transgender as an adjective than as a noun. And we generally say now trans people. Okay? Individuals who identify as transgender, trans, should not be confused with individuals who choose not to conform to society's assumptions about what is masculine and feminine. I'm going to again quote Joy Landon, great book, by the way, and I've sent Suzanne a list of resources and readings, which she will send you after the session. Right? Landon writes, there are also many people whose internal sense of gender is fundamentally at odds with the gender assigned to them at birth. This often has little to do with the characteristics or expectations outlined above. Gender is much more than how one dresses or which stereotyped behaviors one enjoys. Gender describes the internal map of the self, right? So again, someone's gender or someone being trans is not something that you can determine from external observation, by the person's clothing, by whether the person climbs trees or not, right? Thank you, Layden. Thanks, Ruth, right? So when we talk about the internal map of the self or an internal sense of gender, we're acknowledging that an individual has a sense of being gendered that may or may not correspond to our perceptions of the individual's body or their genitalia. To be trans is to be an individual whose gender identity or expression is different from cultural expectations based on the sex they were assigned at birth. When we talk about gender dysphoria, we're talking about the experience a person has when their sense of gender is not perceived by others because of the gender they were assigned at birth, all right? So again, this is basic stuff and I cannot go into great depth, but here's what I want you to understand. There is no way that you can test for gender, right? You can't test for gender based on anatomy or hormones or chromosomes. And therefore, the best criteria for gender is the individual's self-understanding. So if somebody tells you that their understanding of gender is whatever it is, you don't want to push back based on what you see or what you think is their gender. This is how we respect people's sense of self. When people talk about gender transitioning, they're talking about the process by which a person moves towards embracing and expressing their inner sense of gender identity outward. The students that I know who have spoken about this describe it as a journey, right? This is not a moment's change or a decision. It is not an operation. It is not hormones. It is a journey that may involve years and may involve steps. We know that there are people who realize at an early age that the gender that other people have assigned to them doesn't fit. And there are people who realize this much later in life. For some people, gender transition may involve hormone treatment because hormone treatment can be a vehicle to allow a trans individual to present to others as they perceive themselves. It may sometimes also involve surgery. Having said that, it may involve neither hormones nor surgery, right? Those are the choices an individual makes in order to be comfortable with their external presentation as it might accord with their internal understanding, okay? So, I now want to talk a little about what I see as our responsibility as rabbis who care for people. I'm actually going to skip a little. But what I want to emphasize, oh, and I'm, by the way, not looking at the chat because I can't look at you, my notes in the chat, so we'll talk when we're finished. First of all, I want to say that just as we accept people as they are in a variety of other ways, I really believe that our responsibility as rabbis and as Jews is to accept people as they present themselves. That is, if someone comes and tells you that they identify as a female or a male or as trans or as non-binary, what you need to do, what we need to do is accept them. Not ask them if they've legally changed their name, not ask them if they're using hormones. God help us, do not ask if they're having surgery, because all of those things send a message that we are not ready to accept someone as they present to us unless they do something, okay? And imagine if we did that to someone else, right? Imagine if we did that in a situation where someone comes and tells us any variety of things, and we say, not until you prove this to me. But I want to say that I understand that this is difficult. When I was 19, I told my parents that I was going to legally change my name to the Hebrew name that they gave me, you know, because this was what my grandparents expected them to do, which they never expected to call me by. And it wasn't simply that I was going to change my name, it was that I expected them to start to call me by my Hebrew name. And being 19, I expected them to do this without thinking at all about how they might feel about it. Okay, because that's the pleasure of being 19. Think of the individuals who you have converted to Judaism and what they asked their families of origin to accept about them, right? That they were going to make this incredible life change. And now ask yourself what it means for someone to suddenly deal with the fact that their granddaughter now is their grandson or their grandchild. So I do understand that this is tremendously challenging and loaded for us. And I think, by the way, that there are texts that will help us with it. But again, I'm going to let you look at the texts, right? And yes, similarly, it is difficult to bring up the past in ways that are hurtful, which again is very challenging. I mean, I don't think any of us want to cut all the pictures of our trans child before the transition out of our album, okay? But so I am going to give you 8 takeaways that I have learned in the last 2 years, okay? And then we'll talk, right? These are the things I think we really, really need to do, and everything else can follow. The first is that we need to try to push ourselves past a binary understanding of gender identity, which sounds simple, but for many of us, and certainly for many of our older congregants, is incredibly challenging, as I'm learning with my student pulpits. Again, the example of, yes, we know so-and-so uses they, them pronouns, but of course they're a girl. It's like, no. So we really need to just get past that. Secondly, whatever pronouns a person uses are the pronouns we use for them, right? This is incredibly difficult for some of my colleagues who think that it is ungrammatical to use they for an individual. And when someone says that to me, I say, just get over it. It doesn't, I mean, as we all know, most of us use incorrect grammar at least 3 times a paragraph, right? We all end our sentences with prepositions, all right? This is not about grammar. This is about kavod. Thirdly, we need to accept people without insisting they help us understand it, right? It is not a trans person or a non-binary person's job to help you understand what it means. If they want to explain it to you, that's lovely, but they don't need to. I think that one of the things that I learned from my student and teacher, Elliot Kukla, is that when you ask somebody, when you say to someone, help me understand you on short acquaintance, what they hear is, until I understand this, I cannot accept it. And we need to accept people as they are and hope that we might come to some better understanding, but for our sakes, not for theirs. Fourth, do not pry, okay? If I walk in looking different next week, Nancy will not say to me, oh, Dvora, you look wonderful. Did you have a nose job? Okay? You would not ask your congregant that kind of question, right? And we do not ask trans people whether they've had surgery, whether they're using hormones. That is really invasive, no less invasive than if you said to me, Dvora, what meds do you take, right? Okay. Just consider adding your pronouns to your email signature and your Zoom box. Why? Because it signals that that's an okay thing to do and that you understand that not everyone uses pronouns that are obvious to other people who see them. I do not think you should require people to do it for the simple reason that I have been taught that some people aren't ready to out themselves as non-binary. And if everybody has to use their pronouns, you're pushing, okay? But I think when those of us who are comfortable doing it, do it. And I'm sorry about mine because I logged in and apparently was my husband's identity and had to change very quickly, right? But it signals that you understand that this is an issue. 6, really simple, did it in the rabbinical school. Look at all of the forms in your organization and add a space for pronouns. Because if you just add pronouns instead of the things we do now, then people can choose to add their pronouns and you do not make assumptions based on their name. Consider using non-gender specific pronouns, they, their, them, in translations when you're not referring to somebody whose gender is obvious or definite, okay? I've done this with rabbinic texts. Believe me, it's not easy, but it's not that difficult. To say in every generation, a person should see themselves as if they had gone forth from Egypt is just fine. And frankly, by the way, changing all those forms from he, she to they was a piece of cake. And this is the most weird one, but it's really helpful. I have been taught that if you practice using people's pronouns, it gets easier to get it right. So before I go in to talk to someone about one of my non-binary students, I literally walk around saying, I borrowed a book from so-and-so. They recommended it to me. I need to return it to them by next Wednesday. And if you do that enough, the pronouns will come out more easily. You will feel like an idiot the same way you probably felt when you practiced your senior sermon in front of a mirror, okay? But you will get better. I want to end with a quote from the rabbinical school admissions essay of one of our current students. I am quoting it with her permission. And she writes about the formation of her Jewish identity and her transition. And I think this pretty much says it all. She writes this: transitioning from male to female was a spiritual journey in and of itself. When I was a teen, I had no sense of spirituality. However, my gender dysphoria reflected a disconnect between my assigned male at birth body and my female soul. Though this disconnect has often caused me pain, it has also helped me realize that my soul is a spiritual entity separate from my body. In my transition, I was finally able to open myself to God, and instead of being angry and resentful that God didn't make me a woman, I became joyous as I realized that God had indeed made me a woman, just in a different way.
Thank you, Dvora. That was amazing. That was so important. And I'm sure other people are clapping silently behind their mute buttons. So we have about 15 minutes for questions, or comments. And I know there were some in the chat, so since Dvora was not able to read them all, if you have something you'd like to bring up, please feel free to do so. I know there were comments. Melanie, you had a bunch of comments. In fact, you had one question that looked very important, so please feel free to ask it.
Well, I'm probably reflecting my age, born just a little bit before Dvora, but we fought so hard through my high school and college years so that girls could play with trucks and boys could play with dolls, and people had the freedom to be who they were, however they presented. And I'm wondering how that connects or doesn't connect to the moment that we're in right now.
It's a really interesting question. And one of the things that has surprised me is how some of my older gay friends have more trouble with trans people and non-binary people even than I do. And I think part of that is that, you know, every generation that fights, every group that fights for recognition, I think has trouble letting go of being the group that needs to be recognized. That's just my gut feeling. And I also will say, Melanie, that, you know, when the faculty first began to discuss non-binary issues and pronouns, and, you know, the hardest thing for me was not putting pronouns in my, you know, in my email signature, which is, you know, once you figure out how your email signature works, you can do almost anything with it. It was when I was told that being a woman was, that I was speaking from a place of privilege as a Jewish woman. And I'm sorry, but someone had to pick me up off the floor. And I said, this is the first time in my entire Jewish life that anyone has ever said that being a straight woman was, you know, as a Talmud professor and a rabbi was a place of privilege. So I think it's really hard to make that transition from being, you know, from sort of focusing on your own power dynamic and your own sense of, you know, being a minority, so to speak, or being unprivileged to being privileged. And of course, as all of you who are on the CCR Facebook page, which I thank God I'm not, realized that I think someone said to me, you know, women's issues aren't an issue anymore. And when I saw the latest, I said, really? Funny about that, isn't it? So I think that we're also, look, I think that everyone struggles with other people's identities because we all get very caught up in our own and in the fights we've had to fight to be recognized. So that's just my guess. And I think some of our younger colleagues can probably speak to that better than I can.
Are there other questions, comments?
I have a philosophical question. I completely appreciate the idea that we should recognize the primacy of an individual's self-definition. And having been on campus for many years, I've had the privilege of accompanying several students on the journey around gender fluidity. But I wonder how, as a tradition that is much more attuned to the communal than Christianity, which is attuned to the individual, how we both respect the individual in this process and also don't lose the kind of communal orientation that I think is one of Judaism's gifts.
I think that's a really good question for all of us is, you know, and I think it comes up, I mean, I'm on the responsive committee, you know, Hatatai, and, you know, so we're talking about conversion of trans people. And this is an issue, is like, you know, how do we understand both the communal expectations of what's involved and, you know, so I think this is what we're going to navigate. But I think that, you know, one of the things we have to ask ourselves is which of our community standards, if you will, or expectations, which of these are ikar and which of them are tafel, right? That is, you know, look, I remember many, many years ago, the first time my husband and I got something addressed to Rabbi and Mrs., which you can imagine just made me so happy, especially when it was, the assumption was that he had the money and I didn't. And when I said to someone, you know, hi, we use different last names, they said, well, that's not the way our computer system in this Jewish organization is set up. And well, we won't repeat what I wanted to say, but the point is, you know, that was the communal expectation, is that I should have the same last name as my husband. That's what I was told when I went to the hospital and had my baby, by the way, was that I had nerve having a baby with a different last name than me. But that's an example of tafel. The community survived perfectly well when my husband and I did not have the same last name, right? So that's what we have to ask ourselves, is being sensitive to people's pronouns going to really break our community, or is it actually going to create a community? I don't want to use, I've stopped using the word welcoming, okay? No more audacious hospitality for me. I want to talk about belonging, right? What does it mean to create a community where every individual feels they belong? And how can our community be weak? I don't think a community is weaker when people feel they belong. I think it's challenging sometimes, because sometimes someone said what one person needs to belong makes someone else feel awkward. You remember when we introduced Mishkan Tefillah, and some of our congregants said it's too heavy, or there's so much, I feel left out because there's so much Hebrew, right? So everything we do is a sense of balance. And I think our job as leaders is to help people understand that broadening the definition of who is in our community doesn't exclude the people who are already there and feel like they belong.
I would love, yeah, can I respond to that also? It's not just the people in our community, it's the people in this room.
Yes.
Let's just say that as well. This is our colleagues, this is our friends and family in this space. And then the other piece is, yeah, I really wanted to echo what you said, Dvora, about offering someone a seat at the table doesn't exclude others at the table, which I think has been a big learning of the past year with Black Lives Matter and so many other issues. And so, yeah, including pronoun is a way of drawing others into the space and even having conversations around privilege. And I don't see it as being anything that detriments the community at large just because a smaller percentage is a minority. I think that it's incumbent upon us as clergy and as leaders to actually say that we value bringing in that minority and working hard to be demonstrative and even overcompensatory in reflection and in showing those individuals within our community. My own 2 cents.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions, arguments? There was some interesting discussion in the chat about using non-binary as a kind of a negative sounding term. Dana, do you want to address that? Because you did address it in the chat.
Yeah, sure. So I really actually appreciated, Bruce, that you brought that up, because I had not thought about it in the connotation of like the negative within it as somebody who identifies as not a gender non-conforming personally. And so there's some other options, but really the best thing to do is ask the person who's telling you that they are gender non-conforming, or if they use they them pronouns, to ask them what their identity is. It's not a faux pas. It's a great way to actually open the conversation. But agender, gender fluid, gender, I put another one in there, gender fluid and gender variant. So those are just some of the other options. Agender is one that is also in relationship. It's not the same, as Dvora mentioned beautifully, with sexuality, but it's the same formulation as asexual, meaning that they are without gender and without the construct of it.
Thanks,
Now,
Dana.
in the resources, and I want to thank Ruth and Jan Ophel and Laura Weiner, who've all shared all their resources with me. There's a great sort of map of all of this terminology, which I found really helpful. By the way, Keshet has the best resources ever, okay, for just being, we're all learning a new vocabulary. It really reminds me, when I started studying Talmud, I had to use, Frank or Steinsaltz or whatever, I think it was Eshnav Talmud at the time, to learn all this terminology. And this is what it's like now, is I'm learning all these new terms. And when I say my students are my teachers, it is really true. I gave this talk 2 years ago at Naor. It was completely different, right? Because I'm learning every week. And it's both exhilarating. This is the great thing about working with 20s and 30s, is you learn all this new stuff all the time and your brain feels like it's about to blow up. So, really what I want to say is that for any of us who are still trying to wrap our minds around this, it's okay. One of my colleagues, who shall go nameless, said to me, Dvora, I just don't understand the whole thing with pronouns. And I said to him, I have really good news for you. you don't have to understand at all. All you have to do is use the pronouns that someone tells you, the same way that you may not understand why I spell my name D-V-O-R-A instead of D-E-V or R-A-H, and it doesn't matter. Just spell my name the way I tell you to. You don't have to understand a damn thing, right? All you need to do is say, if Dana says that their pronouns are they, them, then when I refer to Dana in the third person, I use they, them. Dana does not have to explain themselves to me. I just have to respect Dana.
Great, thank you. One last question for Wendy. Yes, Wendy had her hand up.
So I guess mine is more of a comment, but I think that just like when we talk about the Jewish value of hospitality, and we use the Genesis text as where we get some of our ideas about Jewish hospitality and why it's important, I do think that it's really useful to have these texts when we talk about gender, especially in comparison to other historical and religious traditions and cultures, to be able to say, we have a historical tradition of wrestling with these ideas. And these are, these are the places where we get those ideas, because I do think that it is a very useful tool in having these kinds of discussions within our community as well as outside of our community. So I just want to say thank you so much for this.
Yes, and by the way, even better texts. I taught a course last semester on teaching rabbinics, and two of my students, as their final projects, created a wonderful curriculum for teaching about diversity of gender in Judaism. Zevi Berman and you can tell how tired I am, and Ariel Zitney, and it was just brilliant. I think that we have our students have great resources, and again, some of those resources, Elliot Kukla's rabbinic thesis, Ruben Zellman's rabbinic thesis, the links are in the resource sheet.
Thank you, Dvora. I particularly appreciate how sensitive you've been to us older people who,
people.
I'm older than you are, I'm sure. Anyway, the point is, this isn't easy. Just like every generation has to go through new understandings of how the world works. And, we try to be respectful, and yet it's not always such an easy shift. So thank you for the resources and the scholarship and the sensitivity to this question. So what we're going to do is we're going to shift into our board meeting, which of course everyone is more than welcome to attend in our audacious hospitality moment here. We're going to begin with an HEC report from Dvora, and then we'll have an RPB report, a camps report, and then a report about the convention in January, which we are hoping is going to actually be in Palm Springs. Larry Goldmark has told me that the hotel is quite optimistic about coming in January, so we'll see what happens. So thank you again, Dvora, and for those who'd like to stay for the board meeting, please feel free to do so. And so Dvora, the floor is yours once again.
Okay, this will be brief, no examples. I just want to begin with the general observation that it has been a very challenging year for all of us, including those of us at HUC. I would say that we managed online instruction relatively well, although I have not read the course evaluations. We had our students on multiple continents, 15 time zones. All of our students did their field work online, including their student pulpit work. Tefillah was online. And I just want to highlight the successes. I do think online learning was not bad, but most importantly, I was blown away by the enthusiastic response of the student pulpits to online student rabbis. When I spoke with the leadership of the student pulpits last March or April, they were horrified by the idea of being on Zoom. They some of them threatened to leave the program. And now many of them are saying, wow, our student, instead of being with us one weekend, did Friday night services one week and Torah study another week. And people who could never make it in the winter when it snowed in Colorado were able to be there. And this was wonderful. And I was like, do you remember what you said to me last year? So we actually have congregations that are asking if they can do some of their service online, even when they return to in-person. And I think the most important thing we've learned, and I imagine that many of you of your congregants have learned as well, is that being together in person is really special. But I think we've always taken for granted being able to be together. And I think we'll probably never take it for granted again. I certainly won't. When people say to me, what do you miss? I say really just being able to be with my students, being able to be with my colleagues. Ordination. New York and Cincinnati have completed ordination, and LA will be doing ordination on May 23rd. We are doing it a small ordination service in person at Stephen Wise Temple, and everyone is welcome to watch it, to stream it. Altogether, the college is ordaining about 30 new rabbis this month. Placement, as of now, 25 of those 30 rabbis, or soon-to-be rabbis, have confirmed plans for next year. 16 have accepted positions in congregations, solo, rabbi educator, assistant rabbi. 4 will be working on college campuses, which is a really exciting number to me. And 3 have found work in other Jewish communal organizations. 1 will be doing a CPE residency, and another is going on to do PhD work. And I expect that the others will have positions soon, Im Yirtzeh Hashem. As of this week, we have 26 entering rabbinical students going to Jerusalem next year. We are really looking forward to sending them to Jerusalem. Another 3 were accepted into the program and exempted from the year in Israel, so they'll be starting in the States. We also have a number of students who have been accepted who are deferring for various reasons. So the recruitment and admissions office was reasonably pleased. I'm particularly pleased that most of the students who we accepted have accepted us, even if they're deferring. We didn't lose as many to Hebrew College, my least happy moment. And also that we just got a major grant for creating online Hebrew classes, which we're hoping we can use to help applicants get ready to matriculate and come into the college with a higher Hebrew level. Heidi, is your hand up or are you just stretching? Oh, okay, that's the other problem with Zoom. In terms of planning for the coming year, we are planning to return to in-person teaching as our preferred method of instruction. We're working on the air filtration and circulation systems at the college and social distancing in the classrooms. We also plan to have a number of Zoom classes for cross-campus instruction, and we're working on the technology for hybrid learning to support the very, very small number of students who have indicated that they won't be able to be with us in person. I would say the Hebrew Union College has the highest level of vaccination comfort in the country. And that's without required. Lastly, I'd sort of like to talk about the notion of one HUC as it applies to the rabbinical school. As most of you know, I am now coming toward the end of my first year as National Rabbinical School Director, and I thank all of you who sent both congratulations and questioned my sanity. You're all correct. And then I want to just share with you a couple of the steps we're taking to bring about a more collaborative and sort of collective approach to rabbinic education. First of all, we now have regular meetings of the rabbinical school program directors, including our new Year in Israel director, Reuven Greenwald, so that we can actually talk to each other on a regular basis. We're working on a national approach to deployment. We have faculty members on one campus teaching students on other campuses to fill in for sabbaticals. We have more cross-campus courses so that, for instance, my colleague Rachel Adler, who I regret to say is retiring, but has very generously agreed to teach a cross-campus course, which is full. She has 18 students signed up to study with her this fall from all 3 campuses. which is really allowing us to have students study with great faculty members like her, like Mark Wachowski, like David Ellenson, without being on the same campus as those people. We ran national admissions committees this year. We were on Zoom anyway, so every admissions committee had someone from each campus, which was incredible. And we now have a national approach to fifth-year placement so that we don't, the students in New York and the students in Cincinnati and the students in LA all get exactly the same information from me. So there's no question about, we heard this, but our classmates in the other campus heard that. And I'm really excited about continuing to build on this idea of one rabbinical school, one ring to rule them all and all of that. Yeah.
That's very exciting news. There is a question in the chat from Max. Will the administration be revisiting the policy on prospective students in interfaith relationships, particularly as it pertains to losing out on qualified candidates to other schools that affirm and accept students in that category?
I want to say that, that the administration is always thinking about its policies, but I also want to say that any decision we make about admission standards will be based on our principles and our sense of what it means to be a rabbinical student and what it means to be a rabbi, and not based on assumptions about who will then come to rabbinical school. Because my sense, by the way, right now by RRC is, to the best of my knowledge, the only sort of mainstream in residence 5-year rabbinical school that admits people who are intermarried. And there's no indication that it has raised their admissions. There's an indication that there are people who now go to rabbinical school that might not have, and people who might have gone to RRC who now choose not to. And so I think that whatever we decide will be based on values and what we think is right for us and for the movement and for the rabbinate. So yes, Max, the policy is under discussion, but I hope that it's not under discussion because of someone who says they'll give us money, or someone who says they won't give us money, or someone who says they would come to us if we changed our policy. Because I want to remind you that there's somebody who's not coming to HUC because of every one of our policies. That is, we get applicants who say, we get people who say, I would come to HUC if I didn't have to go to Israel, or I would come to HUC if I could stay in Minnesota and study entirely online. And I think a rabbinical school, every institution's admissions policies need to be based on what it thinks its curriculum is about and what its values are.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments for Dvora? Dvora, thank you so very much.
Thank you. I just want to say that you all know where to find me if you have questions. And I want to thank you because it's been a really crazy year. And I have found that Zoom has destroyed all boundaries, and I'm in meetings all the time. And when I get a chance to talk to some of you, especially my former students, I just feel so embraced and so supported in this nutsy job. And thank you. Thank you for those of you, who mentor our students and employ our students and care about our students and send us our students. And have a wonderful year. And I really hope everyone is getting a vacation this summer.
Thank you, Dvora, and thank you for everything that you do for your students and your alumni and colleagues and friends. Thank you so much.
I hope to see you in January in person.
We do too. Okay, so Michael Kimmel is going to give us a little report from the RPB. Michael.
Hi, everyone. It is so great to see so many familiar faces. I really do miss you all terribly. I missed not being able to come to Palm Springs in January from cold New York. So you can appreciate, my dismay in not being able to travel in January, but certainly look forward to 2022 being with you again. I have some prepared remarks, but we'll try to keep it loose and answer any questions that you have. Maybe it'll be better. Maybe I'll be better than Dvora, and open it up to prompt the questions that might come. Let me start by sharing my screen here. Of course, one of the advantages of Zoom is that I get to have an actual presentation versus just talking with you when I'm with you at PARR. Here we go. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yes, thumbs up. Okay. So just take a little bit of time. I know we don't have a long time. I don't have a long time to be with you today, but I just wanted to take a quick look back at 2020. I know 2020 is a little bit in the rearview mirror now, but we still want to look backwards, look at some of the things we've accomplished, and look at some of the investment results actually through March of this year. Talk about some of our strategic priorities, and then a couple of quick announcements. And then at any time, please just ask questions. I can't see all of you. So Suzanne, maybe if you can maybe moderate to see if any questions happen to come through.
Sure.
Okay, I appreciate that. All right, so looking back, yes, like all of you, we were dealing with COVID. We've been working from home. My staff has been working from home since March of last year, when we shut the office, when everything went shut down. And we remain so. We remain 100% virtual. We had prepared for it and knowing that it might come. And so when we needed to make the call, we were ready to go. And we really didn't miss a beat. At least we don't think we missed a beat. You'll tell us, of course, and keep us honest if we miss a beat. I know you guys are not shy. We're looking and actually targeting to go back to work, probably in a hybrid model in the fall, after the holidays are all done, and we can get back to some kind of semblance of regular schedule. During the beginning of COVID, you'll also remember we transitioned record keepers and our custodian to Fidelity. Think about it. We did that in April of 2020, right at the height of people not really knowing what was going on. And it was a challenge for us. Hopefully we did well with communicating with you all through that process. But we're really happy with the transition and being able to offer you a better platform for managing your retirement investments. You should, if you haven't logged on to your net benefits account and actually the MyRPB portal for participants, I please encourage you to do so and check it out. And on top of the great online experience, of course, you have access to phone-based retirement planners for investment or other financial advice. This is new for us. Our prior record keeper was not able to offer financial advice, but these guys can. And so if you have questions or about how you should be investing, you should really contact them. Use the online tools, but also give them a call. I mentioned the portal. We launched that portal last year, which enables you to have a more comprehensive view of our relationship with you and you with us. You could see your beneficiary information, all your contact information. So we're putting out to you what we have about you. So in case something needs to change, it's a much more meaningful way for us to keep things up to date. And like I said, the beneficiaries are really, really important. Okay, what else? We held our first virtual retirement planning seminar. For those of you who might have attended in the past, we always did these in person. We traveled around the country to different locations. We were supposed to be in Miami last year, then we were supposed to be in Miami of this year, and now we're going to be in Miami in 2022. So we will be online again. So if you're thinking about retirement, everyone's thinking about it, but if you're getting closer to retirement, we encourage you to take advantage of this seminar. And then we also, one of the last things we did in 2020 to improve our method of communications, we implemented some what's known as marketing automation technology, which will only enable us to be more productive with communicating with you and better customizing our messages. One of the key things, and we all know this, is that sometimes you need to customize your messages to different people to get the message across. And we're endeavoring to do that as much as we can. Stay tuned for some custom messages. All right, so performance. Our 1 year results. So this is from March to March. we happen to be 1 year out since the worst of the markets and the worst of when things were a bit panicky. And you could see that we all enjoyed some dramatic returns over the last 12 months. And it's great. I can't say that these kinds of returns will continue. If we look at a shorter time period, 2021 is actually looking pretty good so far. But it's always good to reevaluate where you're invested, match that up with your time horizon, your tolerance for risk. If you have a financial planner, speak with him or her, talk with a Fidelity representative. They can certainly help you because, like I said, these returns are not going to last forever. This is just a continuation of the Vanguard funds, and you could see that all the stock funds did quite well. The bond funds did not do quite as well, but still had some positive return for the year. Okay, looking into 2021, some of the things we're working on. First, we are working on some more customized experiences with you, including a financial wellness program that we, in conjunction with Fidelity, they have some amazing resources. And again, even without us officially launching this program, you have access to a lot just by logging onto your net benefits account. All kinds of help, retirement related, if you have questions about getting out of debt, if you have questions about estate planning. I mean, there are tons and tons and tons of resources that you could read up on and ask for help with. And we definitely encourage you to do so. A little out of order there. Tomorrow, we are mailing postcards and also sending an email announcing 2 additions to our Tier 1 fund lineup. So if you all have any understanding of the way our tiers work, we have our Tier 1 funds, which are custom they're known as target allocation funds or objective-based funds. Those that we've long had. You'll also remember back in 2017, we launched the Vanguard funds, but we only had 3 funds in Tier 1. And what we've done is we're adding 2 new funds to round out that lineup to make the transition as you continue to scale down your tolerance. The tolerance scale makes it a little bit easier to transition and still only need to maybe invest in 1 fund at a time using our Tier 1 funds. So stay tuned for announcements about that. We're targeting middle of July for those funds to be live on our platform, but we're going to be telling you about them now and over the next couple of months. Now, this is an important task force that we've been working on. Some of you might have heard about this. We actually did a survey, with our executive directors, the NADA executive directors, asking a whole series of questions about congregations and whether they offer other retirement plans besides RPB to employees, if they don't, would they consider offering a retirement plan to all of their employees? And we've got a whole bunch of questions around that. And this process is moving forward. And, if all things work out well, again, this is not official by any means because there's still a number of hurdles, but we will be looking to expand eligibility to all employees of Reformed synagogues, not just professionals. And we're going to be putting in proper guardrails in place and proper policies in place to ensure that it benefits everybody at nobody's expense. And so that's a really big change for us, as you can imagine. Again, nothing's been decided upon, but we're working towards making this happen in the next year or so. We're also working on, and this also relates to working with congregations, campaigns to deepen our connections with congregations. It's very important. At the end of the day, right, they're the ones who are writing the checks for all of us and you, and so we want to make sure we have the right kind of relationship with them and making sure they're felt cared for and as necessary. If you think about it, especially with smaller congregations, RPB in many ways is the only human resources like function that exists, for benefits, for pension, retirement, and insurance products. And, we want to make sure we're front and center when congregations are thinking about what they offer to their employees. That's really, really important. And we're also looking to deepen our connection with professional associations. We obviously, the CCAR and the URJ many, many years ago started us, and we have other associations that are part of the family, but we also want to deepen those connections, especially with NADA and ARJE and ECERJ and PEPRJ. Apologies if you hear the dogs barking in the background, can't help that. So again, we're looking to grow and deepen our connections, enhance our value proposition, and really for the benefit of everyone. And then one of the other things we're working on, and one of the last big things, is we're looking to further enhance our technology and the technology, in fact, that your employers, the congregations, work with and engaging with us. So that's the system. The MyRPB for Employers is the system that the congregations use to update salary and contribution information, process payments, contribution payments to us, set people up with insurance, add people, take away people, etc. So that's really important that that technology stays up to snuff and works well with our congregations. And also because, since many congregations only use this system a couple of times a year, it's very important we make it easy as possible to use. We have some other things, and that'll come a little bit later. And what are our announcements? I announced the retirement planning seminar. October 24th to the 26th, it'll be online like we were in 2021. And in Miami, we will be in Miami in 2022. So if you want to wait a year and have an excuse for a trip to a warm weather location in the fall, certainly wait till we're back in person. There'll be more information coming out about that. For those of you who are retired, I see maybe a few of you, I'm just kind of looking through. RMDs, required minimum distributions, will resume in 2021. If you're retired and 72 or older, you will be required to take a required amount each year. For those of you who are young and never heard of RMDs, it's one of those things that you can keep saving and not taking money out of your account. But once you hit 72 and are no longer working, the IRS eventually wants its taxes, and the only way they get paid their income taxes if you guys take your distributions. Set aside parsonage, of course, that's a whole other conversation. If you're receiving your monthly withdrawal, and this is again just to the retirees, if you're receiving a regular monthly withdrawal known as an SWP or a systematic withdrawal plan, and you want to adjust, and you want it to be adjusted automatically to satisfy your 2021 RMD, just call Fidelity. So once you get that set up, every year it'll automatically adjust to make sure your RMD is fulfilled. If you do nothing and the amount of money you've taken out is not enough to satisfy your RMD, Fidelity will automatically set out what we call a stub payment to satisfy your RMD in the November-December timeframe. That'll make up the difference. And then lastly, I just want to mention to check out a replay of our February 4th webinar to learn about our thoughts on the economy and the markets. We always do an overview of the economy and the markets during our first webinar of the year. That can be found under tools and resources on our website. Okay, that's it for my prepared remarks. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts?
Thank you very much, Michael. That was very comprehensive. So anybody have questions for Michael? Dan.
I do,
Yes.
only because it's something I'm not familiar with, and maybe you are. Cryptocurrency has become a new investment tool, and I'm just wondering how the RPP views it as a potential portfolio diversifier.
We have not considered cryptocurrency. It actually has not come up. And I think it has not come up for the reason that Jason is chatting, which is it's too volatile. We stick with tried and true stocks, bonds, cash, real estate, kind of boring in that way. I can't imagine necessarily seeing how cryptocurrency could be an enhancer to our risk-adjusted return, because that's really what we do. You know, one of the things we do, with specifically with our tier 1 funds, where our investment committee, along with our outside investment consultants, really manage those funds, right? We design them, we manage them. We really do look at what's something known as risk-adjusted return. So how much risk are you willing to take for that extra point of return, right? We don't shoot for the moon, right? We try to manage the volatility, the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys on those funds, while still attempting to achieve its mission. So for example, our capital appreciation fund, which by the way, will be changing names also to the focused growth fund. So its purpose is growth, high growth, but not at any cost, right? We still have some diversifiers in there, some bonds, for example, to diversify, to keep the volatility a little bit at bay. Cryptocurrency, I just don't see as something, at least not for the foreseeable future, as something we would consider.
Okay, thank you. One more question I think we have time for. Anybody else? Well, apparently, Michael, you were just about as good as Dvora. There was only one question. So thank you so much for everything that you do for us. And
My
we look
pleasure.
forward to continuing our dialogue.
Yeah, it's great. Look, have a great summer. Hopefully your congregations and employers are starting to slowly open back up in some fashion. I'm looking forward to getting back to services at my place. And also it's great because we're out, we could also be outside too. So with that, I bid thee well. Look, and quite frankly, if anybody wants to set up a time to speak with me or Robert Perry in our office at any time, do not hesitate to call. You know, obviously when I'm at PARR, we sometimes schedule the one-on-ones and chat in the hallway or in the corner. But anytime, very easy to reach. Just go to our website, you can find my email, and we can set up a time.
Thank you so much. And there were some nice compliments in the chat also about
Yes, thank
systems
you.
that have been set up.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I saw that. That's great.
Sure. Okay. So Ali Fishman is going to give us a camps report, although you've received the report ahead of time. And so maybe you already have questions. So Ali.
Hi, everybody. It's so nice to see all of you. I'm going to give you a quick camps and really brief URJ stuff that's happening right now. As many of you might have seen, our Heller High kids were very, very delayed in getting to their program this year, but they have finally made it about a week ago, week and a half ago. They are there now and having a great time and coming back a little bit later into the summer this year, many of them going either to a camp after or figuring it out and what that's going to look like as well, which is very exciting. Our NIFTY and Israel trips also got the green light to go for anyone who is vaccinated and can show COVID antibodies upon arrival and right before arrival. So that is very exciting. And also many of our kids had gotten a little bit left behind in that announcement because of the 15-year-olds not being able to be vaccinated. Now with the FDA approving the 12 to 15-year-old vaccine, we are really hoping that in the next week, we'll get approval also for those kids to be able to go on that trip. And we're really hoping to know by tomorrow when the FDA meets with CDC and that they're all doing their thing to get that fully approved, and whoever all those powers of being are going to hopefully make that happen so that all of the kids who did want to go on the NIFTY and Israel trip are hopefully going to be able to do so this summer, which is very, very exciting. NIFTY X, which is the iteration of NIFTY that we're currently living in, has been happening all the way through the pandemic. And they have had, I should have pulled the numbers, but it's a lot of different virtual retreats throughout the past year and a half now. They've been really successful, lots of attendees, and they're still going, and they just elected brand new boards, and they are on their way to figuring out what NIFTY this year is going to look like at this, new normal that we're all living in. Every NIFTY region is scheduled to have at least one in-person event, most of them scheduled for spring of 22, so that we can hopefully be beyond the point where most of our kids are going to be able to be vaccinated who come to NIFTY events. So that's very exciting. We're planning one for next April, I think it is, for our NIFTY regions up here at Camp Newman, back on our home site in Santa Rosa in 22, which is really, really exciting. It's still regionally focused, and SoCal is still, going strong, as is Southwest, as is CWR and Northwest region. They're all going great. All under the directorship of Jackie Kleinstein, who works for Camp Kalsman as well. So she's our area manager. If anyone needs anything, she's the one to reach out to, and I'll put her information in the chat box at the end too, so that you can reach out if you need anything. I got really quick updates on our 3 regional camps for you. 6 Points, California, formerly known as 6 Points SciTech, in Southern California. They have a couple of really exciting things for this coming summer. They've added a pilot track for arts to one of their 3 sessions, and they've got great response to that. And next year they'll be adding it to all 3 of the sessions throughout the summer. They also have 165 sessions enrolled, which is very exciting. That's a great number for that camp. And if you are on any of their emails or on their Facebook page or anything, you heard as of yesterday that Scripps College, where they were supposed to be this summer, very abruptly and suddenly told them that they cannot be having camp there this year. In a very quick and nimble pivot, they will be at AJU's campus for this coming summer. So they will be really, really right in SoCal there, and it's going to be wonderful. Oh, that's so fun. I love hearing that. And they have a great staff who's ready to get those kids excited about SciTech and arts, which is really just amazing. 165 kiddos. Kalsman is also doing well. They are, as all of us are, in a race to the start line, as I keep saying. They've got 530 campers enrolled for this coming summer. They're building a brand new high ropes course, which is great. And again, if you're on any of their listservs, their big news recently has been that their founding director and longtime member of our URJ youth team, David Berkman, will be finishing up his time with the URJ at the end of this summer. So he's currently working as the head of our COVID task force for all 15 of our camps. Rabbi Alana Mills, she couldn't be with us today because she's meeting with our testing provider for the summer to get Kalsman ready to open in a short month. And she sent her regards. She's the acting director right now. David will be, he'll be saying goodbye to the URJ in just a couple of short months, and then we'll hear what's next with them after that. But they're doing great and finishing up their staffing. I do know that they need some more staff members, both at Kalsman and at SoCal. If anybody's got anybody in their back pocket who's still looking for a job for this summer, please do reach out. I'll leave Jordana's information in the chat box as well when I'm done. Camp Newman is going great up here. We are excited to be able to welcome some folks back in the next year. I'm moving up there 2 weeks from yesterday, so summer is approaching incredibly quickly. And after our 3 summer hiatus from being on our site in Santa Rosa, we are returning home, and we have campers coming on June 18th. It's very exciting. We have almost 700 kids enrolled to come be with us from anywhere to 3 days all the way up to 8 weeks for this coming summer. It's a great number. We're very excited about that. All of our camps have really strict COVID policies for the summer. I sent out a little bit of information in the notes that you might have been able to see. And it's really exciting. Families are excited. A lot of them are already asking about getting their 12 to 15-year-olds vaccinated. All the staff will be vaccinated. We are blessedly fully staffed at Newman, and we are ready and rearing to go. And we start super soon. We've completed about 1/3 of our major master planning and our construction that needs to happen at camp. We've finished our new community center. It's a 2-story building funded by the state, was done in February or so. Our dining hall is set to actually be finished this coming Friday, which is very exciting. And then we built a brand new double-decker cabin and brought in a brand new Mirpa'ah, new health center for the summer as well. So besides lots of other work that has gone on at our campsite too. We are booking year-round retreats again. So if you're in the NorCal area and you're looking to get a group up to see us, or in SoCal, if you want to go crazy, come, drive up. We've started rebooking retreats to start this coming September. So we're really pumped about that. We'll be having a couple of family retreats, so keep on the lookout for that. We'd love to have people helping us to advertise those as well. And otherwise, everything is a little bit bananas, as we keep saying, but we're going to open camp next month. So that is very, very exciting. So I am happy to answer any questions too, and just really grateful to all of you for being such a support for all of the camps over the last year and a half with everything that's been going on.
Thank you, Ally. It sounds like you've got really exciting plans in the works. Any questions for Ally? Everyone's been so comprehensive today that there has been absolutely no need to ask any questions. Jan O'Fell, are you still on? Yes, you are. Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. The main thing that I just wanted to make sure everyone is aware of, and I will put the link to it in the chat, is on the last call, we actually had those of you who are on the call know that there was quite a conversation that went on that call. And I just want everyone to know that we're having ongoing conversations and very good conversations. And this is something that we as a movement are taking very seriously in terms of ethics and ethics in all of our institutions. And I think, though, when we also talk about the importance of ethics in all of our institutions, we also mean in each of our congregations. And the URJ, actually, some of you might be aware, we do have resources available for congregations that would like to provide, create their own ethics policy within their congregation. And what I'm going to do is, when we're finished here, when I'm finished speaking, I'm going to put in the chat the link to those resources, which can be found in the URJ tent. We're going to be focusing more and more, just as an FYI to those of our colleagues who are in congregations, feel that this is an area which, as a movement, we really need to be thinking more about. And we need to, our congregations need to be safe spaces. And those of us who are in the CCAR, of course, we're governed by our ethics. But what about our lay leaders in our congregations? And we all know of issues going on in congregations where there's lay leaders who can be problematic, and where can people go for that? So again, I will put the resources in the link to the resources in the chat. But again, all of our colleagues in congregations, I really hope that you and your congregations are thinking about creating your own ethics policies. I could start telling you stories about some of the calls I get from our colleagues over situations that are going on in their congregations. And we're going to be continuing to provide even more resources in the future, but we already have some good places to start. So thank you. I think you're muted, Suzanne.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate your letting us know about that. And we appreciate all the ethics investigations and meetings and reviews that are going on in all the different parts of the reform movement. So thank you for offering to give us resources. I've actually, started a conversation with my board about this because of our conversation last time. So really appreciate that. Okay, Larry, since our treasurer is not available, would you like to give the treasurer's report? And if you'd like, I can share my screen and share the document that you sent me. Would that be good?
Give me one. Can you hear me?
Yes, and here's the report right here. So if you
Okay.
want to, you can just read it off the screen.
Well, what you don't have is what Rick Steinberg, the treasurer, was going to report, and that is the amount that is in the account, our checking account, and that is a figure of $47,374. $47,374. And as you can see, the expenses basically were for our scholars during the past several months, and the income from, as it turns out, 3 memorial parks and so on. And we appreciate that. And the dues at $50 a colleague, because there was no obviously in-person convention. So we obviously, as you can see by the numbers, we're in the plus column by $3,500. That's the report. Thank you, Rick Steinberg, our treasurer.
Thank you, Larry. And thank you, everything that you do for us.
Appreciate it.
Okay, last but not least, Harry Rosenfeld is going to tell us about our convention that's coming up.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to apologize ahead of time. My wife started work here at the house about 11 minutes ago, and so we're both pulling on. So if I freeze, just send me a text or call me or something, and I'll see what I can do. Okay, convention. I want to first of all thank a number of past convention chairs for their input, and future convention chair Heidi, who has really helped me clarify what I have in my head. And of course, the remarkable and stupendous Larry Goldmark, who for his wisdom and forthrightness and telling me I'm crazy. So I want to start by sharing, talking about and sharing our kind of scholar, I should say. Because of this year and the craziness we've all had, and the recognition that it's only going to get crazier in the next 6 months as we begin to reopen and try and figure out what has been working, what needs to change, what we want to keep, what we finally want to get rid of, all those kinds of things. I've decided that I want to bring in Eva Stern. You can read her bio, it's just the bottom paragraph. The top blurb she and I are still working on. This is the latest iteration. I haven't really gone through it in any detail yet. I just got it late last night. But the basic format that I'm looking at is different, because we want to acknowledge and recognize the huge changes that we've been through and that we are that really we're all going to be facing during the coming year, regardless of the kind of work we are doing, or even if we're retired, as I will be in, hold on, I meant to have this up, I apologize. I'm doing a lot of that, aren't I? 50 days, 11 hours, 16 minutes, and 30 seconds. But I'm not counting or anything. We really want to do this. We want to do it in a slightly different format than we've done in the past. So I want to share the schedule here quickly. There it is. This evaluation, this is kind of a looking back convention, but also looking forward. And so Sunday is pretty much the way it always is. As part of the looking forward and looking back, we will be spending Sunday night hearing from Sally Present on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of her ordination. Which is actually obviously in June of 22, but we're going to be the first people who get to actually honor her in this first year. So she'll be speaking at the banquet, and then but the Sunday night program at this point, and please remember this is yesterday's draft, and I would appreciate any feedback y'all want to send me. But please put it in writing, because if you tell me now, I promise I will space it between the time I go to write it, you put it up there and go right down. What begins to change is during the day, ignore the where question mark, those are room assignments, whatever. Where we begin to change is here in this column here. With Eva's first presentation, the way Heidi and I sort of talked about it last night, Eva will give us a setup for about 30 to 40 minutes, maybe 45. It depends on questions and those kinds of things as well. And then we're going to break out into affinity groups. So for example, just looking at the screen here, I see Evan and Jan and Allie who work in different kinds of institutional settings. It'll depend on how many people are in each setting, a number of people in congregational work, people who have become more entrepreneurial, people who are in different size congregations, and then those of us who are thankfully retired. Because even the retired folks have, this is impacting, as I've heard from my colleagues, impacting us in the way we're interacting with our former congregations and other opportunities that we have. Heidi suggested, and I really want to thank her for it, that there will be people there who don't want to deal with this. And so we're looking at an alternative Judaica session, a speaker or two, or a couple of maybe this will be where colleagues present their own research, and it'll be a more Judaic studies focus. The WRN lunch, I've spoken to Mary Zamor, and she's planning on working with Sally on a program for that. Monday afternoon. Yesterday, and so it was just yesterday, I have been having conversations with Andrew and Hera, but yesterday I formally reached out to the two of them and Rick, asking them to spend Monday afternoon with us. I just, tentatively titled it "The Reform Movement Searches Itself." Updates as to where each part of the movement is in its process, things they want us to know, and really give us an opportunity to have a frank conversation with them. I have told them that this will be confidential, that only PARR members will be in the room. We can talk about partners another time, but certainly no press. And Hera answered immediately, I'm still waiting to hear from Andrew and Rick. I mean, it's been a whole 15 hours since I wrote them. I can't understand why they haven't written back yet. No, I'm kidding. But I scheduled it for the 2 hours, but with a note here that it may run over. And that's why I've left the 3:45 to 4:30, that extra 45 minutes there free, so that we can either be talking with ourselves or if that program runs over. I've also begun reaching out to a couple of people, members of PARR, who I know are superb moderators. And so because I know all of us will have questions for the three of them, and so that's I want somebody very strong there to moderate. There is a possibility that one or more of them will not be able to attend, and that's fine. Or when I wrote them, I said, would the three of you like to do it together, or do you want separate sessions? And so this is in flux, literally just working on this starting yesterday. The rest of Monday's schedule is pretty much the same. And Monday night's program will be a panel, which currently has a lousy title, as I note there, that Heidi Cohn will be moderating. Sally will be included, and I'll be reaching out to another 2 or 3 women who representing different generations. Someone brought up, and Suzanne, I think it was you, I'm not sure, but somebody suggested to me that we broaden it to include other groups, LGBTQ, etc., Jews of color, whomever. I think I want to keep this, given that it's Sally's 50th, I want to keep that focus on women right now. And of course, Larry assures me there will be an ice cream social. Right, Larry?
It's been ordered already.
So I thought. Okay. In order to provide more time, I'm asking HUC to, if you have comments about the ice cream socials or any food related questions, please direct them directly to Larry. I have nothing to do with any of that. My breakout group, whatever it happens to be, both day 1 and day 2, Monday and Tuesday, we'll be meeting at Sherman's and getting our 10% discount. Anyhow, so cutting the HUC breakfast down to 1 hour total. And then the same format as Monday. We will be open to, because it's a new format, we want to see what the reaction is, and we're going to be open to massaging that a little bit. 11:15 is the business session, nominations, elections, all those good things, and perhaps the Council General, if there's a Council General, if there's an Israeli government by then, who knows? Again, lunch as normal. Tuesday afternoon, the CCAR reports. Again, depending on what happens during Monday afternoon session, if we need more time or people are expressing an interest to have more personal conversations, smaller group conversations with the leaders of the movement, this afternoon session might change. Afternoon times might change a bit, but right now 1:45 to 2:15, a half hour after lunch for the CCR reports. 2:30 to 4:15, Michael Gann, and then other activities, including more colleagues' presentations or whatever people want. Ali and I communicated earlier about setting aside time for a camp program, and I think I skipped up on Monday. Did I? Yes. That 4:30 to 5:30 slot will be the local RAC meetings if those groups want to get together. But Tuesday afternoon would be the camp program, and if Arts or World Union wants to present, that would be they would have those opportunities. Dinner, Mariv. In the afternoon, we're in conversation with a couple of different people about speaking in the evening, including thank you to a couple of people, including Bruce Greenbaum and Larry Goldmark. We're talking to Leon Panetta and a few other folks who might be able to, at the very least, Zoom in. Wednesday morning, for the 5 of us who are left, Shacharit, tentatively Steve Windmuller. I haven't spoken to Steve about it, or another person from HUC. And then board installation brunch, and the only PARR board meeting that, no, I'm kidding. And I'll be running the post-convention board meeting. So that's the outline as it stands now. Please email me any comments, concerns, questions, anything, except about food. Those go to Larry. So here's the other piece of this. I'm working on designing this so that it can be any of 3 models, right? God willing, we'll be in person. But even if we're in person, we don't know what the conditions will be by then. Maybe we can't all be there. Maybe only half of the normal crew can be there. It's a lot of that's up to the hotel. Larry's, as Suzanne said, Larry's in constant contact with them. And turns out I'll be in Palm Springs in October to do a wedding, and I'll touch base with them also. Maybe Larry, we could meet there for lunch or something. And then, so the goal is to be in person. But even if we're in person, there are people who can't attend, budget reasons or whatever it is. Max may want to attend from Massachusetts but can't fly in, for example. Heidi has, I think Heidi was it, are you the one working on, I think you're the one working on getting us.
I'm going to be I'm going to be working with Larry as far as when we work at the technology. We have to see as far as with the contract with the hotel.
Okay.
And so Larry and I can have a longer conversation with this, but just really quickly, because we don't want to go into the quote unquote committee work here. Our goal is, yes, absolutely, to be Zooming as much of this as we can, especially the larger sessions. Obviously, when we go into breakout rooms or breakout groups, affinity groups, or Sherman's, we won't be able to necessarily do that. But and obviously, we will not Zoom the private conversation pieces too. Right. So unless there's a way of locking that down. So because we do want to make sure that we keep that sanctified there. So yeah, so I'm going to be working with Larry and with the powers that be, and there you go.
And of course, there is that possibility, hopefully minuscule or non-existent, that will have to be totally virtual, in which case we're ready for that as well. So again, please email me, Rabbi Rosenfeld at congregationalbert.org, or just rabbi@congregationalbert.org. Email me with any comments, questions, concerns, or issues. I conclude now.
Thank you, Harry. Do you want to stop sharing your screen so we can?
Oh, that would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah. That's okay. So quickly, does anybody have any questions that are urgent to ask of Larry? No.
Larry has
Larry of Harry. I'm sorry, or Larry.
I'm just going to refer him to Larry anyhow, so it's okay.
Everything's referred to.
I spoke to the hotel management yesterday, and they gave me the date of June 15th as to when they will know exactly what the restrictions are, if there are any, with regard to our convention. As you indicated earlier, they are booking conventions through the rest of 2021, and they look forward to our coming in 22. Plus, they've already scheduled the Palm Springs Film Festival to occur the first week of January, which means they really feel that Palm Springs by then will be truly open for total business. So they're very optimistic.
Okay, let's hope so. Thank you all for sticking it out for 2 hours. So please email Larry or Harry, depending on whether it's about food or programming. And I guess our next meeting is in October. Is that correct, Larry?
Yeah, the question I had was when in October you would like to schedule that meeting, which would be basically a board meeting, correct?
Right. Well, we can do that offline.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, so thanks, everybody. I hope you all have a great week.
Suzanne?
Yes.
And Larry, are we planning that to be virtual?
Yes.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
I think so, yes. I mean,
that's good, because I'm going to be traveling with my best friend through the Canadian Rockies, and so I'm going to be virtual no matter
don't
what.
rub it in, Harry. Don't rub it in, please.
I'm trying. I'm really.
Yeah. Okay.
Harry,
goodbye.
Could you just send text chat the name of the scholar in residence? I'm just trying to do the.
He did. It's Eva Stern. It's in the chat.
Oh,
okay.
Sorry. I answered the wrong one. Sorry.
You sent it to me. Okay, that's
I sent it to you by mistake.
Okay.
It's Eva, EVA, Stern.
Okay.
Yeah, very simple.
Okay. I'm going to work on my subpar minutes over here. So
that's why I picked her. By the way, it's very easy to spell, and I don't have to really.
Always appreciated.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.